When making pie crust, you have to have your mise en place in place. Today we'll be using a bowl scraper, a pair of food grade gloves, we have all-purpose flour, salt, sugar, ice water, and our fats. Today we are using a combination of butter and shortening. This will allow the dough to be more stable when going in the oven because the shortening has a higher melting point. To begin, you're going to mix your dry ingredients together with your gloved hands to incorporate evenly the sugar and the salt. You are then going to add your shortening and your butter, which have both been chilled in the fridge or the freezer. The reason why you want to chill your shortening and your butter is so that when you incorporate it into the flour and start squeezing it, making small pea-sized pieces, that the butter or the shortening isn't soft and melts in your hands. This way the flakes are stabilized within the flour, and when your pie crust bakes, the puff happens and the flakiness of the crust is created. So you want to rub together with your hands and your fingers the flour and the butter and the shortening. It's creating flakes within your mix. Once your mix looks like this, you're going to set it aside so we can measure out the ice water. To ensure that your water is ice cold, you first measure ice and water together in a larger measuring cup, and then when it's time to add to your mix, you strain your liquid into the measuring cup to the proper amount, ensuring that it's super cold because you do not want it to melt your butter or shortening. Now, when you add your water, you start with only 3 ounces first because depending on the day, if it's humid out, the moisture in the air actually affects the flour and you won't need as much water for your pie crust. If it's a dry day, you will have to add all 4 ounces to it. You begin to mix, incorporating the liquid. This is when you determine if you need more water. If it sticks together and holds like this, you don't need any more water. Now you have your pie dough done, and we have to divide it and chill it for an hour before we can roll it. After dividing the dough into 4 equal pieces, we're now going to take each piece and wrap them in plastic wrap, and you're going to push them down into a disc that's about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick and about 6 inches round, and fold it up, and we'll now refrigerate them for an hour, or at this point you could freeze them for up to 2 months in the freezer and use them for anything that you'd like after you defrost them in the refrigerator overnight. For a 9-inch pie deep dish, you will need to peel, core, and wedge 6 Granny Smith apples and stir in the sugar, the cornstarch, the lemon juice, the cinnamon, and the nutmeg until it's completely coated. After it sits for a few minutes, you'll see that the apples create some juices for your pie. To roll out your pie, you'll need some bench flour, sprinkled evenly, and 1 pie crust to do the bottom. You're gonna carefully apply pressure. You can put a little bit of flour on top and on the rolling pin. Carefully apply pressure, and you do not want to go over the edge of the pie crust because it'll thin out your dough on the edge. So you want to keep it nice and even. And after a couple rolls, you want to stop, use your bench scraper, and turn it. This ensures that the pie crust stays in a nice round circle rather than becoming oblong. After a couple rolls, I reflour and flip. On the edge, if it starts crumbling, you can push it back in. Always use your bench scraper to assist you. Coming back and loosening it, make sure it doesn't overstick to the bottom of your workbench. Once your pie crust is just over an inch on all the sides, you can trim it out. You don't need all this extra. Use your bench scraper, loosen it up, especially in the middle. It's okay if it rips, you can always press it back together once we move it. You take your rolling pin, apply some flour, and you're going to carefully roll. Don't put too much pressure because you don't want it to stick. Roll your pie crust up, lift it, place it on top, holding your pie pan so it doesn't slide, and roll it on. Now you can press it. Again, if it cracks a little bit, this is the bottom, so you can just push it back together. Push it in, make sure it gets all the way into the edge of the pan so that you have a perfect 90-degree angle. And then at this point, we're gonna fill with all the apples and all the juice. It's gonna look overfilled, but you wanna make sure that you put a lot because when the apples cook down, they shrink and you don't wanna have a giant gap in from your top crust to where the filling is. Once you have it in, you can fill in your spots. You don't want to have your apples, the points sticking up because it'll rip your crust, so if you arrange them like so, your crust won't rip. Making sure that there's no large gaps. And then we're going to repeat the rolling out process for the top crust. Once you have your top pie crust rolled out, you're going to carefully repeat the process, roll it up on your rolling pin, and roll it over your apples. And then we're going to do a little bit of trimming. It's a little long in some spots. You're gonna have a little bit of an overhang, and at that point, you're going to just fold it under so it sits on the edge of your pie pan. Again, you can trim it as you go. You're gonna go around and form your edge crust so it sits on top of the edge of your pie pan. If it starts to split up at the top, it's okay. You're gonna cut a vent hole in a little while. If it's a little thin and you want a little bit more crust right there, you can just take a piece and put it on. By creating this seal on the edge and folding under, you will have less of a chance of the juices coming out of your pie when you bake it. You're now going to crimp the edge. I like to do my thumb in my finger and my thumb from my other hand, and you pinch and start the next one right where the previous one left off, turning as you go. Once you have your edge crimped, I have an egg wash here made from an egg and a little bit of milk. We're gonna brush the egg wash on all parts of the pie. Whatever you do not touch with the egg wash will not turn golden brown, and you'll be able to tell. So you wanna make sure you take the time to get in all the spots. You also do not want it to pool right here, because you'll end up having like a scrambled egg when it bakes. So you want to just spread that out so that it doesn't create a scrambled egg. If it does stay pooled, you can take a little bit of a piece of paper towel and it'll absorb into that. Get the edge. If it messes up your edge, you can just fix it with your fingers. And then I like to top my apple pie with either coarse sugar or I need a cinnamon sugar. And then because it doesn't, I already have a slice in the top of mine because of an apple, I'm not going to do a cut, but you could do a little cross mark right here with a paring knife. And then you're going to put it in the fridge for 10 minutes just to chill it. After refrigerating for 10 minutes, you're going to place your apple pie on the middle rack of a 400-degree oven with a sheet pan underneath. This ensures that the filling, if it does spill out, doesn't drip on the bottom of your oven. After 15 minutes at 400, you're going to reduce the temperature to 350 and bake for an additional 35 minutes. The first 15 minutes at 400 helps bake the bottom crust and ensure that it's not soggy.